A sickening crack of hollow plastic eclipsed the dining room's ambient chatter as a heavy silver salad fork embedded itself in the Mafia Boss's fiancée's hand, while the $80,000 crystal chandelier gleamed above all eyes, were fixated on the bloodless wound, an undeniable and sudden exposure of her deadliest secret. Her name was Sophie Miller. 2 years ago, she was just a 24-year-old college dropout, drowning in her mother's medical debt, trying to survive in New York City. Through a friend of a friend, she had landed a server position at Le Jardin Noir, a covert, ultra-exclusive fine dining club hidden behind an unmarked wrought-iron door on Reid Street in Tribeca. They didn't have a Yelp page. They didn't take reservations from the general public. Their clientele consisted of hedge fund billionaires, corrupt politicians, and men who ruled the city's concrete underbelly. The undisputed king of that underbelly was Christian Callahan. Christian wasn't the loud, cigar-chomping mobster from the movies. He was 34, wore bespoke suits from Savile Row, and possessed a quiet, terrifying stillness. He controlled the eastern seaboard's shipping ports and an underground casino empire that rivaled Vegas. When Christian walked into Le Jardin Noir, the entire restaurant held its breath. The general manager, Antoine, would practically sweat through his suit, ensuring Christian's favorite corner booth was prepped. For years, Christian dined alone or with his grim-faced lieutenants. That was until she appeared. Her name was Vivian Croft. She arrived on the scene 6 months before the incident, and almost overnight she had a diamond the size of a quail egg on her left ring finger. Christian introduced her as the heiress to a massive European logistics fortune. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes the color of winter ice. But behind those eyes was a cruelty that made Sophie's blood run cold. Everyone in the Callahan syndicate was terrified of her. If Christian was a sleeping tiger, Vivian was a striking viper. She was deeply paranoid, constantly whispering in Christian's ear, isolating him from his oldest friends and advisors. Within 3 months of her arrival, 2 of Christian's top captains were mysteriously excommunicated. Rumor had it Vivian orchestrated their downfalls because they dared to question her background. For the service staff at Le Jardin Noir, Vivian was an absolute nightmare. She demanded perfection with a sociopathic edge. Once she made a veteran waiter, Thomas, get on his hands and knees to wipe up a single drop of condensation that had fallen from a water pitcher. She rested the razor-sharp tip of a steak knife against the back of his neck, while he did it, laughing softly, while Christian took a phone call outside. Thomas quit the next day, leaving the city entirely. But Vivian had one bizarre quirk that the staff all whispered about in the break room. She never took off her gloves. They were always elbow-length, made of fine, midnight blue or pitch-black silk. Whether it was the dead of winter or a sweltering July evening, her hands were completely covered. When Antoine politely offered to take them with her coat on her first visit, she fixed him with a stare so venomous it could have peeled paint. I suffer from a severe photosensitivity and a rare dermatological condition, Antoine. She had hissed, her voice dripping with condescension. Unless you'd like to pay for my skin grafts, do not touch my wardrobe. Christian, utterly infatuated and blinded by her supposed high society pedigree, fiercely protected her eccentricities. The staff learned quickly to look the other way. But as the months dragged on, Sophie noticed tiny inconsistencies. She noticed that Vivian never ate anything hot. She only ordered cold appetizers or raw oysters. Sophie noticed that when Vivian reached for a wine glass, her fingers moved with a strange, stiff rigidity, lacking the fluid grace of the rest of her body. And then came the night of the summit. It was late October. The air in Tribeca was crisp and biting. Christian had booked the entire back half of the restaurant for a high-stakes dinner with Leo Romanoff, the head of a vicious, expanding syndicate from Brighton Beach. The tension between the Callahans and the Romanovs had been boiling over into street violence, and this dinner was supposed to be a peace treaty, a merging of territories. Vivian, of course, was seated right by Christian's side. The atmosphere in the dining room that night was thick enough to choke on. 7 men in perfectly tailored suits sat around the heavy mahogany table, flanked by shadows that belonged to armed bodyguards. Sophie was assigned to table 4, the epicenter of the storm. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip her serving tray until her knuckles turned white. Vivienne was in a terrible mood. She was wearing a stunning, backless emerald gown, but her signature black silk gloves were pulled up tightly past her elbows. From the moment the Romanovs sat down, she was unusually twitchy. Her gaze darted around the room, and she kept repositioning her left hand, letting it rest uncomfortably close to Christian's water goblet. Sophie. Antoine hissed at her near the kitchen doors, shoving a bottle of rare Domaine de la Romanée Conti into her hands. Do not make a mistake. Pour the wine, clear the salad plates, and get out of there. The Romanovs look like they are ready to pull their weapons. Sophie nodded, taking a deep breath, and walked out onto the floor. The conversation at the table was hushed and lethal. Christian and Leo Romanov were negotiating trade routes, their voices barely above a whisper, but laced with deadly intent. As Sophie approached to clear the appetizer plates, Vivienne snapped her fingers at her. "You," she whispered sharply, her ice blue eyes locking onto Sophie's. "My silverware is smudged. Are you blind or just incompetent?" Sophie looked down. The heavy antique sterling silver fork beside Vivienne's plate was immaculate. There wasn't a single spot on it. "I apologize, Miss Croft," Sophie said softly, keeping her head bowed. "I will replace it immediately." "Do it now," Vivienne sneered, purposefully, shifting her chair back so that it bumped into Sophie's hip. Sophie rushed to the side station, grabbing a fresh set of the heaviest 4-pronged silver oyster and salad forks. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She knew Vivienne was trying to provoke her, trying to establish dominance in front of the Romanov crew. Sophie walked back to the table, carrying the fresh silverware on a small silver tray. As she leaned in to place the new fork to the left of Vivienne's plate, Vivienne did something completely unexpected. She purposefully swiped her arm out, pretending to adjust her napkin, aiming directly for Sophie's tray. It was a calculated move meant to make her drop the tray and humiliate herself in front of New York's most dangerous men. But her timing was off. Her forearm slammed into the edge of the tray. Sophie stumbled back, gasping, desperately trying to catch the falling silverware. She caught the knife, but the heavy silver salad fork slipped through her fingers. Time seemed to slow down. The fork plummeted heavy handle up, prongs facing perfectly downward. Vivienne, reacting with surprising slowness, tried to pull her left hand away. Thwack! The sharp, heavy prongs of the silver fork plunged directly into the back of Vivienne's left hand, piercing right through the expensive black silk glove, pinning her hand against the mahogany table. Sophie froze, all the blood draining from her face. She had just stabbed the fiancé of the city's biggest mafia boss. She prepared for Christian to pull a gun on her right there. She prepared for Vivienne to scream in agony, but she didn't scream. There was no blood, no crimson stain seeping through the dark silk. Instead, a sickening, sharp crack echoed through the sudden, deadly silence of the dining room. It sounded like someone stepping on a thick plastic casing. Christian leapt to his feet, his chair crashing to the floor behind him. "Vivienne!" he roared, reaching for her hand. "Don't touch it!" Vivienne shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated panic tearing from her throat. It wasn't pain, it was sheer terror. She violently yanked her hand back, ripping the fork out of the table. In her frantic movement, The fabric of the silk glove caught on the jagged silver prongs. The dark silk tore completely down the middle, sliding off her hand and pooling on her wrist. The entire table stared in stunned silence. Vivian's ring finger and pinky finger weren't flesh and bone. They were high-grade hollow prosthetics, painted to perfectly match her skin tone. But that wasn't the worst part. The force of the silver fork had shattered the top shell of the prosthetic ring finger. From the cracked hollow center, a fine, odorless, translucent liquid was dripping out. As her hand hovered frantically over the table, 2 drops of the liquid fell perfectly into Christian Callahan's half-empty water goblet. The liquid hit the water and instantly sizzled, turning a bright, violent violet color before dissolving into nothing. Leo Romanov slowly stood up, a dark, knowing smile spreading across his face. Christian stared at the glass, then at the shattered plastic finger, and finally up at the woman he was about to marry. The silence in the room was deafening. The viper had been exposed. Vivian wasn't a shipping heiress. She didn't have a skin condition. She was an assassin sent by a rival family, carrying a localized, untraceable paralytic toxin inside a hollowed-out hand, waiting for the perfect moment to slip it into his drink. And the heavy silver fork of a terrified waitress had just cracked her wide open. The violet hiss of the water goblet seemed to suck all the oxygen out of Le Jardin Noir. For 3 agonizing seconds, nobody breathed. Nobody blinked. Then the illusion shattered. Christian's lead bodyguard, a hulking Irishman named Declan, drew his suppressed Heckler & Koch USP and aimed it squarely between Vivian's eyes. A chorus of metallic clicks followed as every single man in the room, Callahan's crew and the Romanovs alike, pulled their weapons. The elegant, dimly lit dining room instantly morphed into a Mexican standoff. "Stand down!" Leo Romanov barked to his men, holding up a heavily ringed hand. He didn't lose that dark, amused smile. "This is Callahan family business. We are merely spectators tonight, gentlemen." Christian didn't look at Romanov. He didn't look at Declan. His eyes, dark and turbulent as a midnight ocean, were fixed entirely on the woman he had asked to marry him. Vivian was breathing heavily, her chest heaving against the emerald silk of her gown. The aristocratic poise she had maintained for 6 months melted away, replaced by the cornered, feral energy of a trapped predator. She looked at the torn black glove on her wrist, then at the shattered plastic of her prosthetic fingers, oozing that clear, deadly toxin onto the mahogany. "Antoine," Christian said. His voice wasn't a roar anymore. It was a terrifying, dead calm. "Lock the doors. Pull the iron shutters. Nobody leaves this room." From her spot, frozen near the side station, Sophie watched Antoine scramble to the front. The heavy industrial deadbolts echoed like gunshots. The steel security shutters rolled down over the frosted windows, sealing them inside a tomb of velvet and mahogany. "Sophie," Christian said softly, not turning his head. She flinched, a cold sweat breaking over her skin. Yes, Mr. Callahan." "Step away from her. Go stand behind the bar." Sophie didn't need to be told twice. She backed away slowly, her shoes crunching on a dropped bread plate, and scurried behind the massive oak bar. She crouched near the sinks, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the table. Christian reached out and picked up his water goblet. He swirled the violet liquid, gently holding it up to the light of the crystal chandelier. "Custom synthetic, I imagine?" Christian asked, his tone almost conversational. "It smells like absolutely nothing. If she hadn't dropped that fork, I would have taken a sip while we toasted to the new Brighton Beach territory. My heart would have stopped in 3 minutes. A tragic, sudden cardiac arrest. No foul play suspected." Vivian, or whoever she really was, snarled. The refined mid-Atlantic accent she had meticulously cultivated was entirely gone, replaced by the hard, flat vowels of a Chicago street urchin. "You're a dead man anyway, Christian. If I don't finish the job, someone else will." Who? Christian asked, placing the glass down. He pulled a crisp white linen napkin from the table and slowly wiped the few stray drops of toxin off the mahogany. "You're not a logistics heiress from Geneva. That much is obvious. I had my doubts about you for weeks, Vivian. You were too perfect, too tailored to my blind spots. But your background checks were flawless, impeccable. The only way a ghost like you gets a bulletproof identity that passes my security team." Christian paused, his eyes narrowing. He didn't look at Vivian. He slowly turned his head to the far end of the table, looking past Leo Romanov, past his captains, landing directly on his own trusted consigliere. Jonathan Beckman. Jonathan was a silver-haired, grandfatherly figure who had been Christian's right-hand man for 15 years. He had bounced Christian on his knee when he was a child. He was the man who vetted all of Christian's personal affairs. Sophie watched from behind the bar as the color drained entirely from Jonathan's face. "Only my consigliere clears the background checks," Christian whispered, the betrayal carving a hard line into his jaw. "Only you, John. You brought her to the charity gala. You introduced her to me." "Dom, listen to me." Jonathan stammered, his hands coming up in surrender. He was sweating profusely, his expensive Tom Ford suit suddenly looking 2 sizes too big. "She's lying. She's trying to tear us apart. It's a setup. I didn't even say your name, John." Vivienne spat a cruel smirk, twisting her lips. She looked at Jonathan with utter disgust. "Look at you, sweating like a pig. I told you this old fool was too soft, Christian. He paid me $2 million to get close to you. Another $3 million once the ring was on my finger, ensuring I'd inherit the legitimate assets when you died." "Shut up!" Jonathan roared, panicked. He made a desperate, clumsy reach inside his tailored jacket for his holster. It was a fatal mistake. Before Jonathan's gun even cleared his lapel, Declan fired. The suppressed weapon let out a sharp pft, and a hollow point round shattered Jonathan's right shoulder. The older man collapsed backward over his chair, screaming in agony, his weapon clattering harmlessly onto the Persian rug. Christian didn't even flinch at the gunshot. He slowly stood up, unbuttoning his suit jacket, and walked over to where Jonathan lay, writhing on the floor. "You thought I was getting weak," Christian said, looking down at his mentor. "You thought my push toward legitimate shipping was ruining the family's edge. So you hired a black widow, a contract killer with a hollow hand and a pretty face designed to isolate me, kill off my loyal captains, and poison me at the perfect moment. They would have followed me," Jonathan wheezed, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "I built this empire with your father. You were giving it away to suits and politicians." Christian sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. He looked back at Vivian, who was still pinned under the watchful guns of his security team. "What is your real name?" "Lydia," she said coldly. "Lydia Monroe. And you can kill me, Callahan. But I want it on the record that I almost had you. If it wasn't for that clumsy, idiotic little waitress, you'd be a corpse right now." Christian turned and looked across the room, his eyes locking with Sophie's as she peered over the brass rail of the bar. For a split second, the terrifying, ruthless Mafia Boss vanished, and she saw something else: gratitude and an intense, piercing curiosity. "Take them both to the Brooklyn Navy Yard," Christian ordered, his voice echoing in the silent restaurant. "The deep water docks. You know what to do." Declan nodded grimly. He and another guard grabbed Jonathan by his ankles, dragging him out through the back kitchen doors, leaving a thick smear of crimson on the pristine white tiles. 2 more guards grabbed Lydia. She didn't fight. She just shot Sophie one last venomous look of pure hatred before they hauled her away into the night. The restaurant was eerily quiet once the traitors were removed. The heavy scent of gunpowder mixed with the aroma of the ruined truffles and roasted duck. Leo Romanov calmly picked up his wine glass, taking a slow sip of the Romane Conti. "Well, Christian?" Leo said, his thick accent breaking the silence. "I must say, your dinners are significantly more entertaining than mine. Do we still have a treaty?" Christian walked back to the table, ignoring the shattered prosthetic finger and the torn black silk. He pulled a silver pen from his pocket and signed the leather-bound territorial agreement sitting next to Leo's plate. "We have a treaty, Leo," Christian said. "Brighton Beach is yours. The ports are mine. Have a safe drive back to Brooklyn." The Romanovs nodded respectfully, filing out of the restaurant one by one as Antoine unlocked the front doors for them. Within 10 minutes, Le Jardin Noir was completely empty, save for Antoine, a few loyal guards stationed outside Christian and Sophie. Sophie was still cowering behind the bar, trembling so violently her knees knocked together. She was an outsider, a civilian who had just witnessed the absolute pinnacle of mafia vengeance. She knew the rules of the underworld from movies. You don't leave witnesses. She heard the slow, deliberate tap of Christian's leather dress shoes crossing the dining room floor. He was walking toward the bar. Sophie closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek, thinking of her mother in her hospital bed. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I won't be coming home tonight." "Sophie." His voice was gentle, stripped of the command and the violence. She slowly opened her eyes and stood up. Christian was sitting on one of the velvet bar stools, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened. He looked incredibly tired, but his dark eyes were intensely focused on her face. I swear I won't tell anyone, Mr. Callahan," she blurted out, her voice cracking. "I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. Please, my mother is sick. She needs me." "Breathe, Sophie." Christian interrupted softly. He reached across the polished oak bar. For a terrifying second, she thought he was going to grab her throat. Instead, his large, warm hand gently covered her shaking hands, which were still clutching a bar towel. "I am not going to hurt you." She stared at him, paralyzed by the sheer magnetism of the man. "You saved my life tonight." Christian continued, his thumb lightly brushing the back of her hand. "Lydia was right. She was perfect. I was completely blind. If you hadn't dropped that fork at the exact angle you did, breaking the casing on her prosthetic, I would be lying on that floor right now." "It was an accident," she whispered, barely able to find her voice. "She bumped my tray on purpose. She was trying to humiliate me." A dark, dangerous shadow crossed Christian's face. "I know. I watched how she treated you, how she treated all the staff. I thought it was just the arrogance of old money. I was a fool." He paused, studying her face carefully. "Antoine tells me you've been picking up double shifts for 8 months straight. He says you're drowning in medical debt." Sophie's breath hitched. "My mother has stage 4 lymphoma. The experimental treatments aren't covered by insurance. I dropped out of NYU to pay for them." Christian let go of her hands and pulled a sleek black phone from his pocket. He typed a quick message and hit send. "The debt is gone," he said simply. Sophie blinked, confused. "What? The hospital where your mother is staying?" "Mount Sinai, correct?" Christian asked. "I just wired $3 million to the oncology wing under a private philanthropic grant. Your mother's treatments are fully funded for the rest of her life. You don't owe them a single dime." Her knees gave out. She collapsed against the back counter, sobbing uncontrollably. The crushing, suffocating weight that had been sitting on her chest for 2 years evaporated in a single second. She cried for her mother, for the terror of the night, and for the sheer absurdity of the miracle sitting across the bar from her. Christian stood up, walked behind the bar, and knelt beside her. He didn't say a word. He just handed her his monogrammed silk handkerchief. "Why?" she choked out, wiping her eyes. "You don't owe me anything. It was a clumsy accident. In my world, Sophie, there are no accidents," Christian said softly, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Loyalty and life are the only two currencies that matter. You gave me my life tonight. Paying off a hospital bill is pocket change in comparison." He stood up, offering her his hand. She looked at it, then up at his face. He wasn't the monster the city thought he was. He was a king in a jungle of predators, and he was offering her a way out of the mud. She took his hand. He pulled her to her feet, his grip firm and steady. "You're done serving tables, Sophie," Christian said, his voice dropping an octave, slipping into a commanding yet protective cadence that sent a shiver down her spine. "If you want to go back to NYU, I will pay your tuition. But if you want to understand the world you just saved, if you want to learn how to never be at the mercy of people like Lydia or the hospital billing departments ever again, you come with me." It was a dangerous offer, a deal with the devil. But looking into Christian Callahan's eyes, Sophie didn't see fire and brimstone. She saw a man who would burn the world down to protect the people he cared about. "I don't want to go back to NYU, she whispered. A slow, devastating smile spread across Christian's face. "Good. That was 2 years ago. Sophie never put on that black apron again. Le Jardin Noir is still operating, but she doesn't walk through the kitchen doors anymore. She walks through the front door." Christian kept his word. He brought her into his inner circle. He taught her how to read ledgers, how to spot a lie from a mile away, and how to command a room of ruthless men without raising her voice. She learned that the mafia isn't just about violence, it's about leverage psychology and unshakable loyalty. She replaced Jonathan as his most trusted advisor. But somewhere along the late nights, poring over shipping, manifests the shared glasses of whiskey and the lingering glances across mahogany tables, the dynamic shifted. The debt between them vanished, replaced by a fierce, consuming love that neither of them could deny. Tonight, the crystal chandelier above table 4 is shining just as brightly. But there are no Romanovs here. The restaurant is closed to the public for a private event. Sophie sits in the same corner booth, wearing a dress made of crimson silk. She doesn't wear gloves. Her hands are bare, resting comfortably on the table. Christian is sitting next to her, his arm draped protectively across the back of her chair. Antoine walks over, carrying a silver tray with a velvet box. He places it gently on the table and bows with a wide, genuine smile before stepping away. Christian opens the box. Inside rests a diamond, not a gaudy quail egg monstrosity bought with blood money, but a flawless, elegant emerald-cut stone. "No hollow compartments in this one, I promise." Christian murmurs a playful smirk, touching his lips as he takes the ring out. Sophie laughs, the sound ringing freely through the empty dining room. "Are you sure I could always test it with a salad fork?" Christian's eyes soften the ruthless king, melting away to reveal the man who saved her. "You already tested me, Sophie, and you saved me. Will you marry me?" She looks at the man who gave her mother back, who gave her an empire, and who gave her his heart. She doesn't hesitate. "Yes," she says softly. He slides the ring onto her left hand. It's a perfect fit. As he leans in and captures her lips in a deep, promising kiss, she realizes the irony of it all. The city used to fear the Mafia Boss's fiancée. They feared a phantom of viper wrapped in black silk. But tomorrow, when the news of their engagement breaks across the underworld, they won't be fearing a phantom anymore. They'll be fearing a waitress who knows exactly how to use a silver fork and who now sits on the throne beside the king. It's crazy how a single dropped fork can completely rewrite the fate of New York's criminal underworld. Sophie went from drowning in debt to ruling an empire, all because she exposed a viper. What would you have done if you were in Sophie's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. If you loved this shocking, real-life drama, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story.